So last year, I had the opportunity, I was invited to New York to take part in a roundtable conversation. And it was sponsored by Bayer Healthcare, and they wanted to mark the 50th anniversary of the contraceptive pill in the United States. And May 10th of last year marked the 50th anniversary. And the conversation was a roundtable discussion, and it was filmed for a documentary, and then it was photographed by Annie Leibovitz for a book on 50 years, how far have we come? Basically, okay, so it's 50 years, because not that the pill made such a huge difference in everyone's life, but it certainly made a difference in women being able to control the reproduction and how they could plan their families or plan not to have a family. And so it was a moment in time that it was important to talk about women in the last 50 years. So they invited myself, they invited me to talk about women in business, how far have we come. They invited Professor Elaine Mays from the University of Minnesota. She's an anthropologist, and she talked about reproduction and women sociologically. They invited Dr. Diana Ramos, who's the head of obstetrics and gynecology at the University of California. She's a Latina, and she spoke about minority women in healthcare. They invited the Academy Award-winning actress Hilary Swank, who talked about women in the media. And I had an aha moment because I hadn't realized that they cast the female lead after the male lead because then they know how much of the budget they have left to pay them. Because the male lead will command 20 million. And she told a great story where the movie would remain nameless, although she did tell us that the male lead wanted 20 million to play the part, and her rate is 14 or 15 million at that stage. And it was before, I think, her second Academy Award, because she's probably up at 20 million now. And they came back to her and said, look, we can offer you 8. And she said, well, my rate's 4. Well, her agent said, my rate's 14. They said, well, we're paying the male lead 20, so we haven't got the budget. So if you want the part, it's 8. And she told this story, and I'm thinking, my goodness. And here's a woman at the top of her game. So the final participant in the roundtable was an icon for me, Gloria Steinem, on whose shoulders I think many of us stand. She was one of the leaders of the women's movement in America, and her books are extraordinary, and she is a ferocious and fierce advocate for women's rights. And Gloria is pictured sitting next to me on the couch. She's 76 years old, absolutely incredible. And I have to just share with you, I'm wearing this bloody jacket again. Let's just love it. Just love this jacket. Can I tell you? I have no clothes. What I was saying to Gloria, she had on a pair of ultra suede skin-tight hipsters. She had on a huge leather belt with a silver buckle, cowboy boots, and a completely see-through brown chiffon blouse with 2 patch pockets strategically placed. Talk about being authentic, being really real. And what I'm saying to her at that moment, I said to her, I have to tell you, at the risk of being deeply superficial, because she's such an intellectual, you have a rocking body. To which she said, thank you very much. The other thing that happened at this round table, and kind of the reason I share it, is I was so in awe of Gloria Steinem, and I am, that I said to her, I thanked her for her contribution, and I said to her, I just feel like there's so much we can do. There's so much we should do. And she knew about Dermalogica. She knew I told her about how many women in our industry, and that we have 25,000 skincare centers in 86 countries, and 100,000 skin therapists use the product. And every skin therapist has about 400 clients. You know, what can we do? Thinking she'd come up with a brilliant strategy for me to follow. And she looked at me dead in the eye and she said, do more. Do more. And I said, I will. I'm going now to do it. I had no clue what I was going to do. But it just resonated. I mean, you have those moments, don't you, where somebody says something seemingly innocent. Do more. Yes, do more. Whatever we can do, whatever it is, whatever we do, even if it's just telling a story, just do that. Even if it's just clicking like on the Facebook, just do that. Even if it's just saying to somebody, I really believe in women in business, just saying it. Just do that. Whatever we do, is all helpful. And it occurred to me in this round table to think about, so how far have women come in 50 years? I think we've made extraordinary strides, haven't we? I mean, I feel really blessed and really privileged. I think every one of us in the room is incredibly blessed and privileged. We're doing pretty well. And I read a study by the World Bank, and it said women perform 66% of the world's work. Isn't that amazing? And do you know the industry in which we perform most of the work is actually agriculture? We produce 50% of the world's food. And we invest 90% of our income into our families. Don't we know that? We're doing good. Yeah, I'm thinking, go girls. And as I continued reading the report by the World Bank, they also shared that 70% of the world's poverty are women and children. And we earn only 10% of the world's income. And we own only 1% of the world's land. And as I said this morning to Gareth, I think if you take out Her Majesty the Queen, that's probably the 1%. I don't know, just kind of thinking. Well, that's crazy. Given of how much we produce and how much work we're doing, that's the statistic. And in most of these cases, it is a societal issue that women don't feel empowered. I listened to a radio broadcast on the BBC the other day, and it's a woman in Saudi Arabia who is driving a car. She has driven 4 times so far. And they asked her if she was scared, because in Saudi Arabia, women are not permitted to drive. I know. They just built the largest university for women in the world. It's got a campus that houses 50,000 women. Women are not permitted to drive. So you better have a way of getting to that university, or you're not going to be able to go yourself. But what she shared on this radio broadcast was she said, actually, in Saudi Arabia, it's not that it's illegal for women to drive. I'm not breaking the law. It's just as a society, it's not permitted. So she said, I cannot be arrested. I'm not breaking the law. But as a society, it's not permitted. And it just kind of stayed with me. But this is very true of these statistics. Sometimes it's a societal issue. Sometimes it is a legal issue. Women may not be allowed to own property in some countries. Some countries, too many countries, women cannot sign a lease without a male signature. Women are not permitted to sign a rental agreement without a man's signature. In some countries, you're not allowed to open a bank account without a man's signature. In some countries, you can't go out of the house unless you're accompanied by a male family member. Well, that means we've got a lot to do. And then I read a book called Half the Sky. How many of you might have read this book? Well, if you haven't, if we do nothing else, if we achieve nothing else together, I really encourage you, I really beg you to read this book. This is a book written by Nicholas Kristof and Cheryl Wurwand, and it diarizes and chronicles the real stories of girls and women around the world. And as I read this book, and I read about the terrible stories and the inspiring stories, but I read about the widow burnings, and I read about the 7-year-old girls sold into brothels in Asia. And I read about child marriage, where millions of girls are married under the age of 15. Many have born children, 3 or 4 children by that age. Many have died in childbirth because they're physically not formed enough to deliver a full-term baby. And I read about the fact that these things happen so often because girls just aren't worth as much as boys, because girls can't own land, or girls can't build a business, or girls cannot contribute. And I suddenly saw my story. And I realized that was my story. Because you know what? It's a geographic accident of birth wherever we were born, good or bad. And I thought, oh my goodness, I was born in Edinburgh, Scotland. I grew up blissfully unaware of any kind of issues growing up in the UK. I came to South Africa, I emigrated to America, I've built a business. I was blessed where I was born. But if I'd been born to my same mum who was widowed and left with 4 children in another country, my journey would have been very different. I don't know that my mother would have survived. In many countries, she wouldn't have been able to work, definitely not. She would not have had a training, definitely not. She may have been illiterate. She encouraged us to have a training to be able to put food on the table. That would not have been a possibility. In many countries, she wouldn't have been able to go out and buy food. My sisters and I was 3, my sister, well, we probably would have been sold. We definitely would have been married off very quickly. And I realized these young girls in this book, these women in this book, have no less ambition than we have. They have no less potential than any of us in the room. They're no less smart than any of us, and they have no less passion, and they have no fewer stories. But they don't have a voice, and they don't have an opportunity. And suddenly in my ears, I heard Gloria say, do more.